Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Microbrew. My name is J.R. Radcliffe, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. I am joined by my colleague, Curt Hogg, brewer for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel on the other line. And we have a special guest today. We have a special guest today, Curt. This is very rare.
We don't do three-man booth.
Not usually, but Jonathan Judge, metrics guru over at Baseball Prospectus, is joining us today. Jonathan Judge, friend of the show, has been on before. How are you, sir?
I am doing fine. How about you guys?
Quite well. The Marquette has lost and the Badgers are on, so it could be a rough night for basketball fans across the state of Wisconsin. But we are still talking a little bit baseball here. Of course, you, as many people know in the baseball community, are one of the founding fathers of many of the metrics at Baseball Prospectus, and that includes the PECOTA rankings, which just came out, our annual opportunity to freak out about the season ahead. And obviously, with that background, we brought you here to talk about the Brewers promotional schedule, which came out. That's why you're here. How about that cribbage board?
Yes.
I've never seen a promotional schedule. Well, then again, I don't really have a history in my head of reaction to promotional schedules, but I've never seen one come out with it was so varied. It was polarized. Yeah. The cribbage board was the greatest thing ever, and then 3 bobbleheads. What is this poverty? There was no in between.
The poverty.
I will admit I am not aware of what the promotional schedule is.
Consider yourself lucky.
Okay.
It did come out. It did come out as we record this on Tuesday. It's fine. It's whatever. The Brewers have cut back in recent years on the promotional front, but whatever. Obviously, that's not why we're here. We wanted to look ahead to the season. The Brewers, who have made a number of non-moves during the offseason here, are projected, according to the Baseball Prospectus PECOTA rankings, to win roughly 80 games. That would be second in the NL Central. That's well behind the Chicago Cubs, who have upgraded quite a bit into the 90-win territory, and pretty big gap between 1 and 2. I know people were, I don't know if alarmed is the right word. I think, it's they didn't make any moves to this point. 80 wins sounds about right, and I think others are probably thinking that's a little bit low. So, Jonathan Judge, we'll just start right off the bat. Explain yourself, sir. That's the first question. Just explain yourself.
Sure. So, and as always, I really have no idea how these things are going to work out, and that's kind of important. I am focused on trying to be as correct as possible overall, and how that affects one team or another is something I usually find out at the end, sometimes pleasantly, sometimes less so. This is actually sort of an unusual experience as of late, because the joke has been around Baseball Prospectus that we have a Brewer Boost feature that I have secretly inserted into the pipes, because for a while the Brewers were just, getting these constant affirmations and really being projected quite aggressively. And that has gone down. It seems to coincide with the rotation becoming a bit more, varied. And I just think that there's a couple of things going on here. And I think one of the things to remember is that a good portion of your record is not just us sitting here and, just saying, well, we think you're this sort of hitter, we think you're that sort of pitcher. It's the other people in your division. And so we really simulate a season with these players, and we do it 100,000 times or some ridiculous thing. And, we just kind of see who keeps beating whom and whatever, and it just kind of adds up. And I think you can I think this projection is low, quite honestly. I would probably have them more at an 84-ish, maybe 85-ish area, because the Brewers have a bunch of sort of weird, difficult to project things, somewhat by design, somewhat because they don't feel like they have a choice. But I think they have a tendency to favor variance over sort of high, sure thing guys. I think they are convinced, and they're probably right, that they can get more out of the bottom 4 spots on a 25-man roster than anybody else. And so they've got a few wins there. And there are just a few other areas here where you can really, I think, without being too rose-colored with your spectacles, see where it would not be surprising at all if they, are notably better. But I think the real problem here is just the Cubs, because the Cubs, becoming what appears to be, at least on paper, which again is all this is, it's what you look like on paper. The rotation last year was crazy strong, like absurdly so, and those people are pretty much coming back, and the hitters are not bad, and they added Kyle Tucker, which, oh my goodness, I mean that's just, it's not a Juan Soto addition, but it isn't that far off. And the Cubs last year were also just sort of ridiculously unlucky, like comically so. Blowing one game after another to the bullpen and everything else. So I think part of it is the expectation that the Cubs are going to have less bad luck than last time. But there are other things about the Brewers roster and about how we're now evaluating pitching, which doesn't necessarily favor them either. So it's a lot of those factors that are all kind of mixing in.
I think these projections, and maybe this is with every team, but specifically with the Brewers, it's just a really good and interesting way and window into like looking at this team as we embark upon spring training, because like you mentioned, there's a lot of variance here. You can like dig into the individual projections and see like where there's room to grow. Like even with I don't know, like we could talk about individual players, we can talk about whole units, but someone like Christian Yelich comes to mind. You look at his line and it's like, well, that looks more like the 50th percentile projection. That looks more like 2021 Yelich than the version we've seen of healthy Yelich the last couple of years. And obviously, right, like your systems are not baking in like how, what we can see with our eyes about like when he's healthy, this is the player he is. You're looking more so at the numbers. So when you look at a guy like that, what do you make of where he lines up in his projection, and where there's room to go for the Brewers, even with like what we feel like is a pretty known commodity with Yelich?
Yeah, so I would say that Yelich is one of at least three players, all in the Brewers outfield, that create problems. And Yelich's issue is that, we look at a track record for obvious reasons, but, he has obviously started showing signs of kind of waking up again when he's on the field. And so, the problem with doing it in that way is that you have these stretches where you're not on the field, which means that this performance doesn't get treated quite the same way as having a full crap season, to not crap season, but by his standards, reduced a couple of years ago. And obviously the model does not know that he had back surgery and that it was like every single surgery in the history of the world a success. And that they are looking forward to spring training. And so obviously if he shows up and is playing like last year, he is going to overshoot that projection ridiculously. And on the other hand, we don't know that. And we have to kind of build in the likelihood that he's going to have a setback or he's going to do these other things, which respectfully is kind of in the trend. So he's a problem. Jackson Chourio is a problem. Good problem, but a problem. Garrett Mitchell exists to torture me. And so it's just, there's just all sorts of needles with this team, which are fun as a fan, irritating as an analyst.
Sure. And I'm pulling some numbers right now from not your website, but from the Baseball Prospectus Annual Handbook, which features not only yourself but your boys in there as well. I was like, I wrote the Brewers essay. It's not very good, but read it anyway. Read the projections, the whole thing. Great work. If you're listening at home and you haven't ordered your BP annual yet, go ahead, do it at the Baseball Prospectus website. Little plug for you.
Thank you.
Come on our pod, and I do your work for you. That's how it works. You're talking about these problems. I think that's a funny way to think of them, or an interesting way to think of them, because it's difficult to project them, and they may end up being a problem for the other team if like this. These are the players with the ceiling, and Willem Contreras too. But I think we kind of expect him to be at a certain level.
Right.
I'm looking at Chourio here, Jonathan, and we've got And these numbers might be a little different from the final ones, but he's on here for 249 average, 300 on base, 413 slug, 103 deserved runs created plus, so a little bit above average. That would be a down tick in performance from last year, especially the performance over the final 4 months where he was effectively one of the 10 best players in the National League. What do you think? What did the numbers say about him? And then also, like, what do you think though? Well, like, what do you take on? What's your take on Jackson Chourio entering this year?
So my take on it is I truly expect him to largely pick up where he left off last year. I think you have to accept that there's going to be a little bit more people, game planning for him, and they're going to figure out a few more things, and it's going to struggle a little bit perhaps. But no, I really, what we saw was such a transformation that it was not, a hot month by Owen Miller or something else. It was just a completely transformative experience in which, you just see all these people who know a lot about baseball writing, tweeting, doing anything else, saying, this kid's going to be a problem. This guy's a problem. This is not, that don't throw that there. And so I do expect him. I mean, that's where I kind of got to the variance thing. That the potential for the explosion is high. And the thing about it also is that his track record is so short. You go to AA and he struggles, and people are like, oh, but the way he struggled was so impressive. And it's like, well, that doesn't help me very much. And so his track record is short, which means that people of his age normally are not exactly tearing it up, even if they're extremely talented. And obviously the first half of last year was an absolute disaster. And, we've tried to say, can we pay more attention to the second half of the season than the first half of the season or the whole season? It doesn't help. It doesn't help. People are as often likely to come back and kind of go back to what they were as they were to truly be on a trend that they took into the winter when they got into even better shape. So I think he is a very difficult person to project. I fully expect him to exceed that handily. I frankly would be more expecting like a 125, 130-ish sort of thing. And if so, then that, that's like what, 2 runs right there. I mean, that's a big deal. So you're already finding, we're going to find a lot of runs here in the couch cushions. And
sure. Yeah. But like you said, I mean, I'm looking here, 2.4 win player. Like, that's not out of the realm of very real possibilities. And like, we don't like to think that way because it's not fun. But there has not been a lot of linear development for Brewers hitters since Jonathan Lucroy, maybe. Like, I don't know. Theoretically, Jackson Chourio, he's different in every way, but
and we have had instances, or at least one notable instance, of someone who shall not be named, who came back from a fantastic, frankly, far stronger freshman season, and then came back for a sophomore year, and it was very sad. And
Keon Broxton.
It was Keon Broxton.
The first name, first initial, you got it right.
The second letter
Keston
too.
Hira. Friend of the show, Keston Hira.
Friend of the show.
Keston Hira, who found out what happens when you are no longer sort of the interesting new guy on a team that nobody cares about and is not game planning for, and then they show up and they say, "Oh, wait a minute, no, throw it here."
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't think that. I mean, that's my sort of reality check of guys. This stuff happens. It happens, or he could get injured. I mean, all these things that happen, and then his swing slows down, or his back. Just so it's just one of these things where I am pretty confident that if he kind of picks up largely where he left off, his rest of season projection is going to jump up in a hurry. But one really good half season. Congratulations. We look forward to further endeavors.
I want to take a step back. We'll talk more about some individual players, but you had mentioned at the very beginning that the Brewers sometimes even by design, have some high variance, items to consider. And I wonder what you mean exactly by that. I think Chourio is, if I had to guess, probably a good example of that. As somebody who's very young, the Brewers are going to rely, again, if they choose not to sign anybody, they will absolutely be relying on younger players who don't have that track record like Jackson Chourio. And the other thing I would have to think is defense. This is a team that relies on defense, and defense, notoriously difficult to quantify, makes it hard for us to say right now how valuable Bryce Terang or Sal Frelick will be next year, when offensively they're probably not going to be anything special, but defensively is where they're going to contribute. Am I right in that, or are there other elements that when you say it, some of it might even be by design, or there's just so much variance with this team, why it's unique relative to others?
Yeah, and I think that's a different type of variance, but it's still important, and it's sort of relevant for a couple of reasons. One of which is that this year, people who read sort of my introduction, which you're not obligated to do, but if you did, you saw that we changed the way that we were doing balls in play for pitchers, so that it's much more focused on the pitcher's stuff, as is being quantified much better now than just the quality of their results with a little bit of, launch angle, launch speed, things like that. And so that is actually a change that seems to disadvantage the Brewers a little bit. Because like 2 weeks ago, long after these projections had to be finalized for teams and for annual and for others, we had the Arsenal metrics come out, and who are we talking about? At the top of the page for that is Tobias Myers, and so the Brewers seem to like finding people, particularly for starters, who do not have great stuff, and say that's fine. I can make this work. I can work with the Arsenal. I can work with the sequencing. I can make you effective again, or just effective in the first place. So. So that one half of it is that I think that is going to give them a bit of it's going to challenge them a little bit to keep up, at least until we put the Arsenal portion in. But to the point about defense, I mean, the Brewers do have a tendency to expect their fielders to do a lot of the work. And by our fielding metric, deserved runs prevented, DRP, they were the best team in baseball last year. Like running away. And so and Matt Trueblood, interestingly, had an article this morning about sort of the departure of Willy Adames and sort of the strange effects of all these things. But basically, the Brewers lost 20 runs between, what they did last year and in terms of run prevention, defense, and what we have been projected for. Because, again, it's like, okay, good job. We think you're all going to be pretty good. We're not quite willing to say you're going to be that good again. And so, if the defense shows up and shows out, which I think is, I don't know if I call it a certainty, but it's extremely likely. If you are going around the diamond, shortstop, we're going to get a major defensive upgrade, I suspect, or at least it's going to be the outfield is pretty insane. And so I just think the pitchers are going to get more help than we would expect, and I think the defense is going to be a big part of that.
So a follow-up to that, speaking of the pitchers getting more help, there have been other projections that I think like Zips comes to mind, and I was reading through these, and no individual relievers pop off the page, and that's kind of what you expect from projections for a team that doesn't have Devin Williams or Josh Hader. But they were all it was just this cast of guys with sub-4 ERAs, 15 of them. And it's not quite the same when you look at what PECOTA is projecting for these guys. I mean, they're not expecting Trevor McGill to fall off a cliff or another guy like that. But it's still largely unproven, smaller sample relievers, but I think kind of as we think of this team, we view the bullpen as a strength, and there's so many of them, and they're pitching in front of this defense too. Where's the room to grow from where they are projected? And maybe the question is actually last year was just best case, and don't expect that to happen again, even though they have so many options.
Yeah, I think that. I think we think their pitching is going to be pretty good. We certainly think it's going to be better than 680. We project them to give up 683 runs. That's better than all but one team in the East, and all but one team. And it's the only teams that we project to give up fewer runs are the Dodgers, the Braves, and by about a bit of a nose, the Cubs. So, I think they actually are being pretty well regarded. I mean, certainly relative to everybody else, but yeah, I mean, relievers are relievers, and they can be a little volatile for sure.
So maybe it's not so much a case of like the Brewers staff as a whole is being viewed at in a more pessimistic lens than we're used to. Maybe this is more what like you're saying, a product of projections, especially for relievers. Like you might not be blown away by where Abner Uribe slots in, but it's going to work itself out.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, if I just kind of look at last year versus what we're projecting for this year, so we basically have the Cubs holding serve, and between getting a little worse but not much. The Brewers we have giving up 40 more runs, which from a projection, let's take a bit of a step back from your world beating stuff is perfectly reasonable. It's the damn offense. That's where we have them.
We're so back, baby.
Yeah, we're oh god.
We're gonna be so much in our comfort zone this year.
2021, baby.
We are projecting losing over 100 runs, which is just devastating.
And so how much of that is Willie Adames, and how much of that is where's the rest coming from? Because the rest of the roster is back. Mm-hmm. Is where are you seeing that all these runs are disappearing from? Is it like what we just talked about that last year was kind of best case, or what is it?
I think it's two things. I mean, it isn't so much that they are disappearing; it's that there is a bit of skepticism how much they belonged there in the first place. Willie is certainly a big part of it.
Yeah, I love that.
But keep in mind that again, we have these players who are weird and or who have track records that are not really fair to them in terms of our ability to project on them. So you have Jackson Chourio, who, of course, we're kind of going back and saying, if you're playing a lot of left field and Yelich was playing a lot of left field last year, I'm not sure you're going to be better. Might be worse. We have Garrett Mitchell, who has our systems just beside itself over that combo of skills. And I think it's just that they are, I don't think it's not just that we're losing Willie. It's that right now it's like, well, who are you plugging in? 3 out of those 4 infielders are still going to be here. I think another factor, actually, quite honestly, is that Rhys Hoskins was still getting a bit of benefit from the, his previous accomplishments last year, and that got brought back a little bit more down to earth, I think, this year. So again, it's one of these things where I would not be surprised if a fair number of these runs show back up, but it's going to be in a way in which it's like below the radar. Sorry, this is the sort of player we have. And obviously, if you're building around these young players who you're just throwing out there, the Joey Ortizes, the DL Halls, the people like that, the Bryce Terangs, they just sort of jump when they do. And they don't have these track records that your more established players do, that your bigger ball clubs with the big payrolls have. This guy's been around for 7 years. We know what he is. He'll kind of gradually go up, gradually go down. So I think, again, that the offense is what we're really worried about. And I was talking to somebody today about, we were reminiscing about how horrible it was to watch games before last year. And it was just this agonizing death march in which you were wondering if, as a prominent internet comedian says, 3 runs should have been enough. It was just, you were just waiting to lose. And it was, even though we usually would win anyway, it was.
Right. Yeah. Ugh. A win that felt like a loss.
Exactly, which is not how it's supposed to be.
Said the comedian.
Yes. So it was tough.
No, this is that is the natural state for the Brewers. Homeostasis. No scoring.
I do think this is a more talented group of people than we were trotting out in 21, 22, etc., 20. But, and, I have more faith in this group, but the reality is, not until they do it again this year.
Yeah.
So.
Shouts to Anabam, also friend of show. I have no basis for that. I'm just going to say it, though. The internet comedian in question. One of the things with the offense was I think the projections are pretty bearish on William Contreras, and there might be some good reasons for that. I'd be curious to know what factors there sort of foresee maybe a step back for him when he was playing at a borderline MVP level at points last year, particularly early in the season. But then maybe he's the guy, or maybe it's Chourio, if there's anybody, because as we've said, you follow the Brewers pretty closely. If there is any projection you feel surprised you, or that you would maybe disagree with, that you think like, yes, this is what the projection says, but my eyes tell me we're going to see something different.
Sure. So it would definitely be Mitchell, who I have just kind of had to learn how to love to some extent. And I was, I've been telling people that I really kind of believed in these 300 plus batting average numbers and OBP numbers, even though they defied reason and sense. And so, when you have a strikeout rate like that, you are going to get hammered by a projection system. We do not like people who strike out in the 30% range, 30% plus. And I think this year he got better. But you are. And this kind of goes to the article that Curt wrote recently, which I think helps explain some of it. But the reality is a certain number of balls in play are going to be outs no matter what. There's nothing you can do about it. And so, the way that you sort of remain productive consistently over a season is you have to put enough balls in play, because you have to give yourself as many opportunities as possible to not get out. And so when you're striking out at like a 30%-ish clip, you are basically, for almost every player, that is an impossible task. I mean, it is just, you pretty much have to hit a home run all the time because you don't have anything left. And yet he threads that needle in a bunch of kind of interesting ways. And so I think I think it would help if he actually played someone was joking about it. I don't know who it was, but like the Garrett Mitchell breakout would be a 140 game season. Was that the tailgate folks? Whatever. It was the idea of simply being, give us a full season of you would be extremely helpful. Because right now what we have is some really great surface results that I think do have some surprisingly strong under the hood support, but the peripherals are abominable. And so, we got to give the system some time to appreciate that you're just a very special person and let you be who you are.
I think it would be like 100, like 105, 110 games, because you don't want that guy. I think part of what works with Garrett Mitchell is I don't want to say part-time role, because it's the strong side of a platoon, right? But more exposure to the league, playing every day, facing lefties. Like, there's a reason the Brewers, without fail, played Frelick over Mitchell when Mitchell's numbers against lefties were better. Like, think about Game 3 of the playoffs, coming off the homer in Game 2. Guess who was sitting down? It was Garrett Mitchell, and that ended up turning out just fine. But like, in this is a good roster for him, and this is a good role for him. Now, the health is a very large question as well, but like, the Brewers have a team in place that can allow you to deploy him more advantageously. You can hit him in certain spots in the lineup. You can pick and choose. Like, he might also be a guy that you can kind of pick and choose between like pitcher matchups too. I don't know if you've ever taken a look or thought about that, but yeah, you're right. He's like, he breaks the code. He can't hit entire swaths of the zone. He can't hit, like, he cannot touch the ball. And yet about 5 inches away, he's one of the better to best hitters on the team. He does damage. He doesn't chase. He
takes his walks. So
he takes his walks. Yeah. And this is sort of what the article that you mentioned on our swing decisions got at. Like, it's not a perfect look at it by any means, but I think it shows you, like, he's pretty aggressive while also he knows where he can't hit the ball, and he doesn't swing in those areas for the most part. So,
and I'll just add one thing. I mean, I like that article a lot. People should go read it. We've been doing something on something kind of similar, although it's more of a focus on pitchers and their ability. Which pitchers are the best at targeting the weak areas of hitters with their command and control. People at the top of the list are not going to come as a shock. But one thing that I just kind of noticed was that normally your best hitters, the people who have positive run value, pretty much all over the place. Like, you just can't, you can't work them. You can't just put it somewhere and they have a trouble hitting. That's most of your great hitters. Like, and it's just like, go down the list of all the people. And one of the absolute worst in, sort of vulnerability in the strike zone and in terms of results is Aaron Judge. And the reason is, and I think people have pointed this out, he just waits for the meatball and he never misses it. And so people are terrified of him. And so they end up, walking him a lot. And eventually they throw a meatball and it's gone. And, so there is something, I guess, to be said, know who you are. And know what you're not. And I guess if you are good at those things, you can make a career for yourself.
Aaron Judge, that's interesting you bring that up, because his name kept coming up when I was just like doing endless baseball savant searches for, like, is Garrett Mitchell good at this? And Aaron Judge was like in similar areas and tiers of, like, swinging and missing at certain pitches, and it's like, now there's a whole lot, there's a large world here that's very challenging of getting the meatball and doing damage on it every single time. Otherwise you turn into Keston Hiura, basically.
But if they're going to throw him to Aaron Judge, apparently they'll throw him to other people too. So
yeah, but there are paths to become a positive player despite serious flaws, and, like, Garrett Mitchell's aware of it too, which is I'm interested to see coming into this year. Like, last year in spring, he was very cognizant of, like, making not so much swing changes, but pre-swing changes, if that makes sense, to get to that fastball. And it seemed like there's been some video of him at Driveline trying to get to that pitch, and who knows, like, if that ends up being something that changes his profile, or, like, the opposite could happen too, right? Where you make a change that actually is detrimental to other parts of your swing, and those parts of your swing are incredible too. So I think I call him, like, the most interesting player in baseball no one talks about. We don't even talk about him enough on the pod, JR.
We should definitely talk about Garrett Mitchell at all times going forward. He could be our new Keston Hiura. We could do that.
You could have a new free swinger. I think that's important.
He's got to be gone first, and then he'll become Keston.
Oh, well, that's true. So, he's never going to become Keston. So don't worry. He'll be. We'll believe in him.
Jonathan, I don't know if this is taking it a step too far to ask you this question, but we have talked on the past on the pod about the Brewers not doing a lot this offseason, and we'll continue to talk about it because, yes, there's still a lot that they have not done. I wonder if the numbers give you any insight into the wisdom of that. Maybe we are wrong about that, especially at this point in the offseason where obviously there's only a few players left, and presumably the Brewers would be waiting to get the best bargain possible to supplement what they already have. I see 80 win projection and think there would be room to add, but also I don't think there's anything necessarily out there for them to add that's going to greatly boost what they have going on. I just can't imagine they're going to go into this season with Caleb Durbin or Oliver Dunn or Andrew Monasterio as your third baseman. So I'm running out of hope
in a week.
Right? Like we are less than 2 weeks away from spring training. Is there anything that?
But sorry, go ahead.
Is there anything in the numbers that suggests to you, you know what? Maybe maybe we don't realize how much the Brewers have this figured out. That what they already had, especially when you compare it to past seasons where they have been projected to do not as well and then they overperform, maybe what they had is fine, and that we shouldn't be thinking about them adding more people. What? It's kind of a tough question to tackle, but what do you think about that?
I think there are a couple of things going on. I think I don't think they're sitting there saying we've got a 90-win team here, so we're just going to show you guys. I don't think they believe that for a second. I think they probably think they have something in the range, perhaps maybe even a little higher of what I was saying, kind of that mid 80s, which is their marginal win value for we can do something with this, because they always find a few more. I think it's more just the reality of that they've got a plan, and this is how they do business, and they do business in a way that sort of gives them maximum flexibility. And in order to do that, they have to be constantly sort of, hugging their prospects and letting them grow up and come and help the team and give them playing time when they're ready. And I think and then they're doing all their little other things around the margin to sort of find people who can kind of help out. But I think there's kind of just a quiet confidence that they will develop a few guys, they will find a few other folks. But to your point, there aren't a whole lot of people that I would have said, that's definitely going to be a couple of wins right there. And the only real candidate would have been someone like Bregman, and that becomes a real issue if there's the length of the contract. And I think what I was kind of musing about this publicly like a week or two ago, and it still comes down to the fact that people probably aren't spending enough money. So I don't want to make it look like I'm sugarcoating that part of it. But from the Brewers' standpoint, it isn't really about, I think, how much can I afford to spend. It's about how much dead weight can I take a risk of having on my team. So for the Phillies or the Dodgers or, I don't know, the Rangers to have like $70 million of useless payroll space is not a big deal. They won't be happy about it, but, them's the breaks when you go out and get the free agents, and a couple of them are going to bomb at the end or never turn out, and that's just the way it is.
Well, and when you actually win the World Series, you can kind of just step back for a couple
no, and I don't begrudge them that at all. But I mean, for example, if we sign a $30 million guy and he blows his knee out, and you're paying him $30 million for the next, couple of years, we all know he's not opting out, and so that is I don't want to call it like an existential threat, but that creates a real problem for the team. And so I think what they would kind of say is, since we don't think that we can take the risk of the truly marquee free agents, and the guys who are more in the middle are also a little more uncertain, and the likelihood that they are going to actually be better than what you have in-house by the time you're done with your platoons and you're moving around and all that stuff, and plus you don't have to pay them a bunch of money, and they never ever have to worry about the decline phase of anybody. I think that from their standpoint, it's just sort of not worth it. And I think that's a very long-winded way of getting back to your question, which was, what do you think their plan is? And I think their plan is to just do their thing and trust that it'll kind of weirdly work out and be deeply amused by it and pleased, because that's just kind of what they do. And it always just kind of works out. And so since they kind of feel like they have to do that anyway, in their opinion, I think it's just they aren't sitting there saying, oh, we have this world beater team. I think they're just kind of like, we have we like where we're headed. We want to keep heading there. We're not gonna get off course.
The thing that makes it difficult to covering this team, your job is always to basically you feel like you need to have an idea of what the team is. And the problem is that I never do. There's this wide range of outcomes, not only in the terms of the variability of the players, like you mentioned earlier, but like you just said now, there's this secret sauce element to it, where it's truly not a thing for most organizations. Yet we do have a track record of seeing the Brewers get the most out of the back of their roster, guys that come to they just get the most out of their players. Their major league player development and game planning and all this stuff is quite excellent. Yet that just like that doesn't give me this like, if I'm thinking of the Brewers, this like comfort in my stomach, because it doesn't feel like it's more abstract. We do see it implemented in real tangible ways, like look at Tobias Myers last season. That was Tobias Myers, but that was largely the Brewers planning to like, hey, guy, you've been kicked around the league, but you can maximize it in this way, and they did exactly that. So, but it still just doesn't feel like this tangible thing that I can bank on year after year after year. Even though, like, if I had to pick, I would probably say, yeah, the Brewers are going to pull some player development rabbits out of their hat this year, and like Bryce Turang turned into a Platinum Glove winner last year. Is Caleb Durbin actually like a really an elite defender and going to give you 3 wins? I don't think these things about the Pirates. Right. I do not think these things about the Reds. I don't really think them about the Cubs either. And sort of, I don't know, that's maybe one of the arguments in favor of the Brewers once again overachieving their expected results. But like, there's also like a scientific element to this, right? Of like, when does that run out compared to talent?
It's funny because I was thinking about this, and it's certainly a convenient philosophy given where their sort of financial approach is. But on the other hand, if it works, it's always convenient. But I think it's what's continually sort of impressive about them is how they seem to be sort of pivoting to another area of necessary and impressive strength. Like the stuff that they were doing with pitchers a few years ago is such old news at this point.
Right.
That they don't have I don't think they have any advantage there anymore. At least maybe a little bit on the Arsenal side, but not on the here's your new pitch, here's your that. I mean, that's all old hat. But over the last couple of years, and it does seem like an area when people say they don't spend money, it does seem like an area of huge investment. It's just very striking to me that the veins of gold that they are finding in Latin America, which used to be, we would overpay for people who were just nothing. And now it's like they are finding these people. They're finding them in different countries, and they're finding the people that in the good old days were like only AJ Preller could find these guys, or only the Dodgers or the Red Sox have the guy in the Dominican who gives them a call when they got to go look at something.
Right. Yeah. It's connections. So much connections.
And but now all of a sudden the frickin' Milwaukee Brewers are going down there, and they had one pretty much top prospect they yanked out of there, and now it looks like they've got another one.
Jesus made.
Yep. And he is, we'll see the full season performance, but it's just ridiculous what he's been doing so far. So if you keep finding those guys, I don't think it really matters what else you do. But it may well be that there is some benefit to just sort of sticking to your plan and just having the same plan every year and never going all in and insisting at the trade deadline, only trading for people who drastically overperformed and will not perform the same way for you when you trade for them. But then again, you largely gave up spare parts for most of them anyway, so who cares? And it's almost like by avoiding making a decision they'll ever regret, they are always in a position to benefit from the next opportunity. I don't want to be too sort of, excusing the,
Yeah, don't be too nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I honestly think there's another.
We need some JR negativity here
somewhere.
Yeah,
but they could spend a bit more than
they sure could.
They could spend. They could spend. That is a motto for them.
But it isn't like they're trotting out 74-win teams all the time, or some of our NL Central rivals who I don't know what they're doing. I'm not sure they almost certainly know far more about what they're doing than I do, and they know far more about everything than I do. I don't understand what they're doing. I don't understand what the plan is. I'm not sure there is a plan.
Luck into Paul Skeens and pray.
Yeah, and then be like, why, we're stopping all the runs. Why are we not winning all the games? And looking around in a state of confusion. I feel bad for those.
before we let you go, Jonathan, what else in the numbers struck you? Like maybe a rapid fire, 2 or 3 observations that you that maybe you thought should be a takeaway, even if we have not latched onto it.
I have largely shared those already. I
All right.
think, yeah, no, I mean, it was, but I was really interested in is how does this sort of compare to last year? And the reality is that the team is sort of pleasantly boring, and they just sort of like it that way, and it will generate many Pat Murphy quotes, and it as they develop and try to take quantum leaps and do all the things that are important to do. And I think it is actually one of those teams that it's going to be like, well, tune in, because you're not quite sure what you will see, but there's a reasonable chance it's going to be pretty good. And that's kind of how I view it. I don't really see them as a team that I can ever really say they're going to do this or going to do that. It's just this sort of, it won't be boring. Well, unless they don't score any runs. That will be boring. So they need to score runs.
Well, I mean, you can still call up Craig Yoho, and it would be not boring. Bring him to me.
Do you think major league hitters are going to swing at those pitches?
Yes, some of them. I've seen Devin Williams.
He doesn't have the Devin Williams fastball.
No, that's true. We'll find out. Tune in. They could be reasonably good. That's our podcast motto from now on. Tune in. It could be good. It could be something.
Yeah, he is a major league groundskeeper sort of routine or something about over the course of the season.
Maybe we'll bring Jonathan Judge on mid-July when Craig Yoho has like 20 innings under his belt, and we will find out if major league hitters are in fact swinging at those pitches. He does have like 4 pitches, so
that is my only concern.
We do have some wiggle room. Yeah, well, we can't say a bad word about Craig Yoho on the pod, otherwise.
No, absolutely not.
It wouldn't be.
We will disintegrate. So
he is Jonathan Judge, our alliterative analytics ace for Baseball Prospectus, the PECOTA rankings. I'm just going to call it his brainchild. I know that's a little bit overstatement, but I don't care. That's what it is, and he hopefully provides a little bit more insight on what to expect, at least for now, from this Milwaukee Brewers team. Curt and I will be back again very soon, presumably to talk about all the moves that haven't been made.
Correct. All the big signings that are coming this week. It's going to be exciting. You guys are going to have so much content next week. I hope you're ready.
We might legitimately be breaking down that promotional schedule. We might be talking about whether or not we think the Bryce Terang Platinum Glove bobblehead is legitimately one of the better ones on the docket over the past few years. I don't know, Curt, but thank you for listening to this episode of Microbrew. We'll be back with you again very soon. Headed down for spring training. Any what do we got? 7 days for our colleague Todd Rosiak? Is that a little more than that?
Todd's flight is pitchers and catchers report in like a week.
Feb 12. Let's go.
So Todd's flying down in like 5 days.
Does Todd always take the first half?
Todd likes the first half, which is fine with me. I like the games, so.
Yep. All right, so that's what's coming up soon. We'll talk to you again very soon, everybody. Bye-bye.